I expose their lies during the family party to show who's truly the mastermind. My hand was shaking so hard, I almost dropped my phone into the punch bowl. The kitchen smelled like sugar and cheap champagne and roast chicken, and every laugh in the living room felt like it was happening at my expense. I could hear my sister's voice, bright, practiced, doing that thing where she sounds like she's smiling even when she's cutting you open. And honestly, she said, loud enough for the whole house, we've all been so patient. Some of us have really stepped up. Some of us, well, a few people chuckled in that uncomfortable way where they're trying to be loyal to the person talking. I stepped out of the kitchen before I could talk myself out of it. The tile under my feet was cold, and my stomach kept doing that drop like I'd missed a step on stairs. I could feel my pulse in my throat. My aunt turned as I walked past, eyebrows lifted in a "You okay?" look, and I didn't answer because if I opened my mouth, I was going to either cry or scream. My sister was standing by the fireplace with a glass in her hand like she lived there, like she owned the room. My mom was right beside her, lips pressed thin, eyes already warning me. My sister's husband, Evan, was near the TV, one arm on the back of the couch, smiling like this was a show he directed. And in the middle of all of it, on the recliner, my grandmother sat wrapped in a soft blanket even though the heater was blasting, her hands folded like she was trying to make herself smaller. It was a Tuesday night 3 months ago when my grandma called me crying because she couldn't find her debit card, and that should have been the moment I listened to the part of my brain that was already whispering, something's wrong here. But my family has a way of turning something's wrong into "you're dramatic," and I've spent my whole life swallowing my instincts to keep the peace. I moved back to our side of town last year after a breakup and a job shift, and I started coming by Grandma's twice a week. At first it was just groceries and little fixes, tightening the loose stair rail, replacing the batteries in her smoke alarm, getting her those easy open jars she liked. Then she started forgetting appointments and leaving the stove on. We had a family meeting where everyone did the usual performance. Lots of "we should" and "someone needs to," and then my sister, Marissa, did what she always does. She assigned roles like she was a manager and we were her staff. Mom and Dad would handle paperwork. Marissa would coordinate care, and I would. Just keep doing what you're doing, because you're good at errands. That's how it always is. Marissa is the organized one, the responsible one, the one who has a family and can't be expected to do everything, which somehow means she does the parts that involve being praised and I do the parts that involve being exhausted. But I didn't fight it because Grandma mattered more than my pride. I just wanted her safe. And then the story started. First it was little things. "Did you really forget to pick up Grandma's prescription?" Marissa would say in front of Mom, eyebrows arched, like she was just concerned. I'd say I didn't. "I picked it up. It's in Grandma's bathroom cabinet." Grandma would look confused, like the cabinet might contain a raccoon instead of medication. Mom would sigh like I'd disappointed her. Evan would do that smirk where he pretends he isn't smirking. It was bigger things. "Grandma said you yelled at her. Grandma said you asked her for money. Grandma said you're stressed, and maybe you shouldn't be alone with her." It was always "Grandma said," never "I saw." It was always filtered through Marissa like it had to pass through her mouth to be true. I started keeping notes, which sounds insane until you're the person being slowly painted into a villain, and you can feel the brushstrokes happening in real time. I started texting Grandma instead of calling so there'd be a record. I started taking photos of receipts because suddenly I was confusing the family about what I bought and what I didn't. I started feeling nervous when I walked into Grandma's house, like I was on camera, even when I wasn't. And the truth is, I was on camera. I just didn't know it yet. The night Grandma called about her debit card, I went over after work. Her living room was dim, the curtains half closed, and the air smelled like that lavender lotion she always used. She sat at the dining table with her purse turned inside out like she'd emptied her whole life onto the wood. "I didn't go anywhere," she kept saying, tapping her fingers like she was trying to remember by force. "I didn't buy anything. I don't know where it went." I checked the usual places, coat pockets, the little dish by the phone, between couch cushions, while she watched me with that helpless look that make your chest ache. I finally asked, gently, "When was the last time you saw it?" She blinked a few times. "Marissa took me to the bank," she said. To make it easier, she said I shouldn't have to worry. I felt my jaw tighten. What do you mean, make it easier? Grandma shrugged, almost apologetic. She said she'd help. She's very busy, you know. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a breath and asked Grandma if we could look at her recent transactions. Grandma didn't know how. I logged in on her old laptop that still had a sticker on it from Windows 7. The password had been changed. I remember that moment so clearly. The cursor blinking in the password field like it was patiently waiting for me to admit I didn't belong there anymore. My own grandmother's account, and suddenly I couldn't access it. I tried the old password, then the other old password, then the maybe she used the dog's name guesses. Locked out. I called Marissa. She didn't answer. I texted. No response. I called Evan. He answered on the second ring, cheerful, like he'd been waiting for it. Hey, everything okay? Grandma can't find her card, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. And her bank password is changed. Did you guys change it? A pause. Not a confused pause. A calculated pause. Oh, Evan said lightly, yeah, we did that. For safety. You know how scams are. Marissa didn't tell you. No, I said. I could feel heat rising up my neck. Why wouldn't you tell me? Because, he said, and I could almost hear the shrug, you've been kind of overwhelmed lately. We didn't want to add stress. I stared at Grandma, who was watching my face like my expression would tell her whether she was safe. I didn't even bother arguing on the phone. I just said, what's the new password? And waited. He gave it to me, like he was granting me access to something I shouldn't have touched. I logged in, and my stomach dropped so hard I had to brace my hand on the table. There were transfers. Not huge ones, not the kind that scream fraud to a bank, but consistent. 200 here, 150 there. A reimbursement for groceries that didn't match the receipts I'd been saving. A payment labeled home help that didn't go to any agency we discussed. Grandma leaned forward, squinting at the screen. What is that? She whispered. I swallowed. I don't know, I said, because I still hadn't accepted it. My brain wanted a softer explanation, something like miscommunication or accident, because the alternative meant my sister and her husband were taking money from our grandmother and then telling everyone I was the problem. The next day, Marissa called me like nothing happened. Hey, she sang like we were friends. Evan said you were poking around Grandma's account. Please don't do that without telling me. It confuses her. It confuses her because you changed her password. I snapped, and the sharpness surprised even me. Her tone cooled instantly. Okay, she said, like she was talking to a child. You need to calm down. We're doing what's best. You can't handle this kind of responsibility right now. You've been intense. Intense. I repeated. Marissa, there are transfers to accounts I don't recognize. Oh my God, she sighed. That's Evan paying himself back because he's covering stuff. You don't see everything we do. I do see everything I do, I said, voice shaking now. I'm the one buying her groceries. I'm the one. Not everything is about you, she cut in. And honestly, you've been making Grandma nervous. She told me you get weird and interrogate her. She's 81, okay? Stop stressing her out. That's how she did it. She took the fact that I asked questions, and she turned it into cruelty. She took my concern and made it sound like control. And then she used Grandma's confusion as proof. After that, the family dynamic shifted like someone had tipped the board. Suddenly, every time I showed up, Grandma would say, tentative, Marissa said you're tired, or Marissa said you might not come anymore, like she'd been prepped to accept my disappearance. Evan started being at Grandma's house more, always helping, always in the background when I visited. Once, I went to the bathroom and came out to find Evan leaning over Grandma's laptop, his fingers on the keyboard. He looked up too quickly, like a kid caught with a hand in the cookie jar, and then smiled. Just cleaning up some pop-ups, he said. Pop-ups? Sure. I should have confronted them right then. I should have blown it up immediately. But there's this specific kind of fear that comes from realizing you're the only one who sees the pattern and everyone else thinks you're paranoid. Every time I pushed, Marissa tightened the narrative around my wrist like a zip tie. You're spiraling. You're jealous. You're having a hard time since the breakup. You've always been dramatic. And my mom didn't defend me. She did what she always does when conflict threatens her image of family. she begged me to be quiet. Just let Marissa handle it, she'd say. She has a system. Or worse. I know you mean well, but you're making it harder. So I got smarter instead of louder. I started watching. I asked Grandma's neighbor, Mrs. Daly, if she'd noticed anything unusual. Cars coming by, people taking Grandma out. Mrs. Daly, who has lived next door for 22 years and watches everything like it's her job, narrowed her eyes and said, "Your sister's husband has been here a lot. Late, too. And I saw him carrying out a box once. I thought you knew. A box." I asked Grandma if anything important had gone missing. She said no at first, then later mentioned her little envelope wasn't where she kept it. The one with her insurance documents and her will copy and the deed to the house. My throat went dry. "Who else knows where you keep it?" I asked. She hesitated. "Marissa," she said softly. "She said she put it somewhere safer. Did she tell you where?" I asked. Grandma shook her head and looked down at her hands like she'd done something wrong. "I didn't want to argue," she whispered. That sentence made something in me harden. Not in a heroic way. In a tired way. Like, okay, fine. If they want a version of me that's the villain, I'll be the villain that tells the truth. I called the bank the next morning and asked what options Grandma had for monitoring. The woman on the phone was kind but firm. Without Grandma present, they couldn't discuss details. So I picked Grandma up, took her to the branch, and sat next to her while she signed forms with hands that shook. I didn't make it a big dramatic confrontation. I didn't accuse anyone to the banker. I just asked for alerts on her account and for a list of linked transfer accounts. Grandma looked at me like I was both saving her and betraying her at the same time, and I kept my voice calm because if I cried, she would panic. Then I did the thing I never thought I'd do. I bought a tiny camera for Grandma's living room. Not hidden, not sneaky. I told her about it. I positioned it on the bookshelf where it could see the front door and the laptop table. I explained, gently, that it was like a safety measure, like the medical alert necklace, but for her house. Grandma didn't love it, but she nodded because she trusts me in that quiet way that still exists underneath Marissa's noise. And within a week, I caught Evan. Not in a movie way, not him twirling his mustache while emptying his safe. Just him coming in with Marissa when I wasn't there, kissing Grandma on the cheek like a politician, then sitting down at her laptop and logging into her bank account with confidence. Marissa stood behind him with her arms crossed, scanning the room like she was guarding the door. Evan pulled up the transfer page and typed in an amount, $300, then paused when Grandma asked what he was doing. "Just paying the cleaner," he said without looking up. "What cleaner?" Grandma asked, genuinely confused. Evan laughed. "The one who came Tuesday." Grandma blinked. "No one came Tuesday," she said. Marissa's voice snapped in, sweet as syrup. "Grandma, honey." "Yes, she did. Remember? The nice lady who vacuumed." Grandma looked at her, uncertain, like she was being handed a memory she didn't own. Evan clicked confirm. I watched it later, sitting in my car outside my apartment. My phone in my lap, my hands clenched so tight my nails dug crescents into my palm. My first thought was relief. I'm not crazy. My second thought was nausea. My family is doing this to her while she sits right there. Over the next month, I collected everything. The bank alerts, the linked accounts, the footage, the texts where Marissa tried to bait me into sounding unstable. "Are you okay? You're scaring Grandma. Maybe you should take a break from caregiving." I stopped responding emotionally. I kept everything short. "I'm visiting Grandma on Thursday. Please don't change her appointments without telling me. Can you send receipts for transfers?" She never did. Meanwhile, they were building their story about me. I could feel it in how my aunt started talking slower to me, like I was fragile, in how my cousin asked if I was doing better, and how my mom kept pressing her lips together when I walked into her room, like she was bracing for me to cause a scene. And then came tonight, the family party, Grandma's early Christmas gathering, because it's easier to have everyone together before travel, Marissa said, except nobody was traveling. It was just easier to stage manage everyone in one room. I should have known Marissa would use the party to cement the narrative. She'd done it before at my graduation, at my engagement party, at my dad's birthday. She likes an audience. She likes being the person everyone turns toward. I arrived with a tray of deviled eggs, because that's what I always bring. Evan opened the door and gave me that too friendly grin. "Hey, stranger," he said, as if he hadn't been slowly erasing me from Grandma's life. Marissa swooped in from behind him and kissed the air near my cheek. "So glad you made it," she said, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "Grandma was worried you wouldn't." I looked past her into the living room where Grandma sat, and Grandma's face lit up when she saw me. That small light made my throat sting. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, and I meant it. "For an hour, I play nice." I smiled. I handed out plates. I listened to my uncle complain about traffic. I watched Grandma's hands tremble as she held her cup, and I kept refilling it so she wouldn't have to stand. Every time Marissa brushed past me, she'd throw out little darts disguised as jokes. "Don't let her near the wine," to my cousin. "She's been so stressed lately," to my aunt. "She needs a project," to my mom, like I was a bored teenager instead of the person who'd been doing the actual work. I kept swallowing it. Not because I'm weak, because I was waiting for the right moment. The moment where the lies would be the loudest and the truth would land. That moment came when Marissa clinked her glass and gathered everyone's attention. Okay, she called, grinning. "I want to say something." People quieted. Plates paused midair. The TV glowed silently in the corner, a fireplace video looping because Marissa is obsessed with things looking cozy. Evan drifted closer to the TV, like he already knew he'd be needed there. Marissa put a hand on Grandma's shoulder. "We're all here because we love Grandma," she said, "and because family matters. And this year has been challenging." Grandma's mouth tightened a little, like she didn't like being talked about in past tense while she was still breathing. Marissa continued anyway. "Some of us have had to take on a lot. Managing appointments, finances, care. Things Grandma shouldn't have to worry about. And I just want to thank Mom and Dad for trusting me to handle it. And Evan for being basically a saint." Evan did a modest little nod. People laughed softly. "And I know," Marissa said, tilting her head like she was being generous, "that not everyone has been able to contribute in the same way. But we're trying to be patient and understanding. Because sometimes people go through things and—" She looked right at me, right at my face. And in that second, it wasn't even about Grandma anymore. It was about Marissa winning, about her needing everyone to see me as beneath her so she could stand taller. My heart hammered. My ears rang. I stood up before I fully decided till like my body was done waiting for permission. "Actually," I said. It came out louder than I expected. Every head turned. My mom's eyes widened in immediate panic. Grandma looked startled. Marissa's smile froze, but only for a fraction of a second. She recovered fast. "Oh," Marissa laughed lightly. "Do you want to say something?" My hands were trembling, but my voice stayed steady because I'd practiced it in my car like a lunatic. "Yeah," I said. "Edo." Evan's gaze sharpened. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. I walked to the TV stand and picked up the remote that Evan had left there like a prop on purpose. My fingers slipped a little because my palms were sweaty. The room was too warm. Someone's perfume was making my head ache. Marissa's tone went sweet dangerous. "What are you doing?" I swallowed and looked at Grandma first. "Grandma," I said gently, "I need you to listen, okay? And if you want me to stop, I will. I promise." Grandma stared at me, her eyes glossy. "Why are you upset?" she asked, small voice. "Did I do something?" "No," I said quickly, and that almost broke me, because of course her first instinct was that she'd caused it. "No, you didn't. You didn't do anything." Then I looked at the room. And my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, my parents, people who'd watched me get slowly rewritten into a selfish mess because it was easier than questioning Marissa. "I'm done being patient," I said, and my voice shook just slightly on the last word. "I'm done letting Marissa and Evan tell you stories about me, so nobody looks too closely at what they've been doing." Marissa made a sharp little sound, like a laugh choked off. "Excuse me." My mom stood up halfway. "Please," she hissed. "Not now." Evan stepped forward, palms out. "Hey," he said, calm voice, like he was dealing with a wild animal. "Let's talk privately." "No," I said, and pressed the button. The TV screen changed. The fireplace disappeared. A video filled the screen, grainy, wide-angle, Grandma's living room. Evan walking in, Marissa behind him, Grandma sitting at the table. You could feel the room physically shift, like the air thickened. Marissa's face went white so fast, it was almost impressive. "Where did you get that?" She snapped, voice suddenly not sweet at all. On the video, Grandma asked, "What cleaner?" And Evan laughed and said, "The one who came Tuesday." In real life, Grandma's hand flew to her mouth. People started talking all at once. What is this? Why is she filming her? I told Grandma about the camera. I said loudly over the noise because I knew someone would accuse me of being sneaky. "It's for safety." She agreed. Grandma, eyes wide, whispered, I did agree." Marissa looked around, frantic, trying to find an angle. "This is insane," she said. "You're humiliating Grandma." "No," I said. "You've been humiliating Grandma. You've been treating her like she's a wallet with a heartbeat." Evan moved like he was going to grab the remote. I stepped back, blocking him, and I felt this strange calm settle in, because once you jump off the cliff, there's nothing left to fear from the height. The video ended, and I clicked to the next thing. A screenshot of Grandma's bank alerts, names of linked accounts, transfers highlighted. Not a complicated spreadsheet, just enough to make it obvious. "That account," I said, pointing, "is Evan's. The transfers labeled home help and reimbursement have been going there." My aunt made a sound like she'd been slapped. Evan's face went tight. "That's not." And before anyone says, "Maybe it's an accident," I cut in because I could feel the urge in the room to soften it. Here's the part where Grandma didn't know what the money was for, because nobody is paying a cleaner, because Grandma is the one sweeping her own floor. Marissa's voice rose. "You are lying. You've always been jealous of me." "You." I turned to her. "Jealous," I repeated, and I couldn't help the laugh that came out, sharp and ugly. "Marissa, I don't want your life. I don't want your marriage. I don't want your performance. I just want Grandma safe." My mom finally stood fully, hands shaking. "Marissa," she said, voice small, "tell me this isn't true." Marissa looked at Mom like Mom had betrayed her by asking. Evan stepped in, voice smooth. "Let's not do this in front of everyone. This is a misunderstanding. We've been managing the finances because you want to control," I said. "Because if you controlled Grandma's money, you controlled Grandma. And if you controlled Grandma, you controlled the story." I clicked one more time. Text messages appeared. Marissa's number at the top. Her words, "Don't tell anyone you're taking her to the bank. It'll cause drama. Then later, if she asks, tell her it's just a safety thing. Then, stop letting her talk to my name alone. She gets ideas." The room went so quiet you could hear the fridge humming. My dad's face darkened in a way I hadn't seen since I was a kid, and someone had done something truly unforgivable. "Marissa," he said low, "what is this?" Marissa's breath came fast. Her eyes darted to Evan like he could hand her a script. Evan's jaw worked like he was chewing words before speaking. And that was the moment I finally saw it clearly, not just suspected it. Marissa wasn't the mastermind. Evan was. Because Marissa looked panicked, like someone who'd been promised this would never happen. Like someone who'd been told she was in control, only to realize she wasn't. Evan, meanwhile, looked angry, but controlled. Calculating. Like a man figuring out the fastest route out of a burning building. He tried one last thing. He smiled. He shrugged. "Okay," he said, voice even. "Let's say we made some mistakes. We were trying to help. You know how hard caregiving is. Everyone's stressed. I'm sure we can sort it out." Sort it out. Like it was a scheduling conflict. Grandma stood up then. Not quickly. She's old, her joints stiff, but with a kind of quiet determination that made everyone stop moving. Her blanket slipped off her shoulders, and she didn't even bother grabbing it. "I'm not stupid," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. Marissa's face crumpled. "Grandma, I'm not stupid," Grandma repeated, and her eyes were on Evan now. "I know when someone is telling me what to remember." Evan's smile twitched. Grandma turned to Marissa. "And I know when my granddaughter is using my forgetfulness like it's a tool." Marissa's mouth opened and closed. "I was helping," she whispered. Grandma's eyes softened for half a second, like she still loved her, because of course she did. Then the softness went away. "You were helping yourself," she said. And you were letting him help himself, too. My mom started crying quietly, hands over her mouth. My dad looked like he might actually explode. My aunt muttered, "Oh my God," like a prayer. Evan's voice sharpened. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, and the mask finally cracked. "You're going to believe her?" He jabbed a finger toward me. "She put cameras in your house. She's obsessed. She's been waiting for a chance to." "Get out," my dad said. Evan blinked. "What?" "Get out of my mother's house," my dad repeated louder. "Right now." Marissa made a noise like she couldn't breathe. "Dad, please." "No," Dad said, and his voice shook with something that sounded like grief. "Not please. Not now." Evan looked at Marissa, silent demand in his eyes. "Fix it. Handle it. The way he always did." Marissa's shoulders rose and fell fast. She looked around at the room, full of people who had always believed her, and for the first time, nobody offered her a lifeline. She looked at me, and her eyes were full of fury and something else. Fear, maybe, or shame. Hard to tell. "I didn't know," she said suddenly, and it came out too quick, too desperate. "I didn't know he handles the transfers. Evan whipped his head toward her. "Seriously," he hissed, not caring who heard. And there it was, the real dynamic. The mastermind and the assistant. The man who'd been whispering into my sister's ear, shaping her instincts into weapons, using her need to be the golden child to get access to Grandma's life. I didn't feel triumph. I expected to. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I just felt exhausted, like I'd been holding my breath for months, and now my lungs didn't remember how to work. Grandma's knees trembled, and I rushed forward to steady her. Her hand gripped my wrist surprisingly hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears gathering. "I'm sorry I let them." "No," I said, bending close so only she could hear. "No, you didn't let anything. They did this. Not you." Behind us, chaos kept rippling. People arguing, Marissa crying, Evan trying to talk over everyone, my dad pointing at the door like a judge. Someone's glass tipped and spilled red wine on the carpet, and nobody even noticed. Evan tried to leave with Marissa, pulling her arm. Marissa jerked away. "Stop," she snapped, and I almost laughed because even now she was still trying to look like the one in control. But her hands were shaking. Her makeup was streaking. My mom stepped toward her. "Is there more?" she asked softly, voice broken. "How long has this been going on?" Marissa stared at the floor. Evan's eyes flashed, warning her. Marissa's throat bobbed. "I don't know," she whispered, and I believed her more than I wanted to. Not because she was innocent, because she was gullible in the most dangerous way, gullible to her own entitlement. My dad walked Evan to the door like he was escorting out a stranger. Evan kept trying to speak, to charm, to reframe. "We could talk tomorrow. Let's not make this a spectacle." Dad didn't answer. He just opened the door and pointed. When Evan finally left, the house felt suddenly too quiet, like the party soundtrack had been ripped out. People stood around, holding plates they no longer wanted. My aunt sat heavily on the couch. My cousin hovered near the hallway, eyes wide like he'd just watched a car crash. Marissa remained in the middle of the room, crying now, but still angry. "You did this," she spit at me. "You ruined everything." I looked at her, and I tried to find a sister I used to have, back when we were kids in the backyard, when she'd braid my hair too tight and I'd still let her because it meant she wanted me close. But all I saw now was someone who'd been willing to sacrifice me to stay on top. "No," I said quietly. "You did, and you were fine with it as long as everyone believed I was the problem." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I was protecting Grandma." I shook my head. "You were protecting your image," I said. "And Evan was protecting his access." Marissa's mouth twisted. "So what now? You want everyone to hate me." I didn't answer right away because the truth was messy. Part of me did want her to feel what I'd felt, being doubted, being dismissed, being made to look crazy. But another part of me was staring at Grandma, who looked small and tired and heartbreakingly old, and thinking how much time we'd already wasted. "What now?" I said finally, "is Grandma gets her passwords back. Grandma gets control of her money back. And you don't get to be alone with it." My mom made a small sound of agreement, like she was clinging to something solid. My dad nodded once, stiff like it pained him, but he understood. Marissa wiped her face hard. "So, you're the hero," she said bitterly. I almost smiled, but it wasn't funny. "I'm not a hero," I said. "I'm just the one who didn't stop looking." After people left, quietly, awkwardly, like they were fleeing a storm, Grandma sat with me at the kitchen table. The deviled eggs were untouched. The punch bowl was half full of melting ice. Someone had left a Christmas playlist running low in the background, cheerful songs that felt like a cruel joke. Grandma reached across and patted my hand. Her skin was papery and warm. "I knew something was off," she admitted, staring at the table. "But when I asked questions, Marissa would get sharp. And she swallowed. He would say I was confused, like it was a kindness." My throat tightened. "That's the worst part," I whispered. "They wrapped it in kindness." Grandma nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting them tell me what's real." I squeezed her hand, and I let myself feel the grief of it. The grief that my family could do this. The grief that I had to become someone who records and documents and exposes just to be believed. The grief of knowing the party was never really the party. It was a stage, and I'd finally yanked down the curtain. Later, when I walked out to my car, the night air was cold enough to clear my head. My phone buzzed with a message from Marissa. "You're dead to me." I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered over the screen. I could have fired back 100 things. I could have been cruel. I could have reminded her she'd been dead to me in a different way for months. Every time she told someone I was unstable. Every time she made Grandma doubt me. Instead, I locked my phone and put it in my pocket. Because the truth is, I didn't expose their lies to win. I exposed their lies because Grandma deserved to live her life without being quietly robbed and rewritten. And because I was tired of being the family's convenient scapegoat while the real mastermind smiled from the corner of the room, remote in hand, thinking he could control the story forever.